Hey everyone, in today's video, I'm going to be explaining why everyone needs to own Bitcoin in 2023 and beyond. Bitcoin has the potential to become the new international money standard, just like gold in the 1800s. Let me start off by explaining the theory of money, the problems that currency issued by a government or central bank creates, and how Bitcoin solves these problems by providing a form of money that's beyond the control of any single government. Let's start off with gold. In the 19th century, gold was the world's international reserve currency. Most countries pegged the value of their currencies to gold. A US dollar bill or British pound note could be redeemed for a fixed quantity of gold. But in reality, very few people held gold money. Instead, people used paper bills, banknotes, or checks for most transactions, and gold stayed in the bank vaults. These bill notes and checks ultimately ended up in banks, resulting in banks owing each other money as the respective depositors did business with each other from time to time. So from time to time, banks would ship gold to each other to reconcile debts, but the problem was that banks might process thousands of deposits and withdrawals and bills and checks every time they sent or received a shipment of gold. The problem was cumbersome to say the least, and during globalization and expansion of the economy, precious metal money just didn't work because there wasn't enough of it to cover all transactions. So while gold did serve a purpose for a long time, the biggest problem with gold is scalability. Gold is not scalable. You can sell a house for like 50 bitcoins and buy a loaf of bread for like 0.0003 bitcoins, but you can't do that with gold. Let's say you wanted to buy a house. Technically, you could buy a house with 300 ounces of gold, for example. But as the global economy scales, let's say you own a bar of gold and you want to buy a loaf of bread. You can't just take a knife and slice off a tiny speck of gold from your gold bar. Gold has a divisibility problem, whereas Bitcoin does not have this divisibility problem because the Bitcoin network supports transactions as small as this amount of Bitcoin. This is one amazing characteristic of Bitcoin, and that is Bitcoin is infinitely scalable. Now let's talk about the next problem, which is space scalability. How do you transmit value over large physical distances? Let's say you want to sell your home in San Francisco and buy one in London or Africa. If the buyer offered to pay you in gold, you would basically have to transport gold over a large geographical distance, which is extremely cumbersome. Think about the time it would take, the cost to protect the gold during transportation, storage costs, and overall hassle. Bitcoin, on the other hand, only exists as entries in a digital ledger, which is stored across many nodes throughout the world and accessed through the internet. So you can access your Bitcoin anywhere in the world as long as you have access to the internet. If you wanted to sell your home in San Francisco and buy one in London using Bitcoin, theoretically it could be instantaneous with much less friction and time. Finally, let's talk about time scalability and the problem with fiat money and why, although fiat problem does solve some of these problems, it doesn't solve one of the major ones, and that is, how do you transmit value over time? Let's say you want to hold something of value today and transmit that value to your grandchildren and great-grandchildren or several centuries down. Let's say, what would you bet on that would have value 300 years or 1,000 years in the future? Hint, it's not Ethereum. So how do you transmit that value? You could buy property, which is historically how you pass down generational wealth. And as long as there isn't something like war or political revolution in your country and your land and property ownership rights are protected, then that could be one way to pass down generational wealth. However, there are heavy maintenance costs and tax costs with property, and eventually everything would get taxed away. The other way would be, once again, gold, which is another way to pass value over time. Gold has been used for thousands of years. Its natural beauty makes it mysteriously precious, and it is the most useful metal in the world. It is a good conductor of electricity, and it does not tarnish or oxidize, and is also extremely malleable. However, the problem with gold is your gold can get stolen away. It's extremely difficult to store and maintain over generations and generations. Now, one thing for sure is that it definitely would not be fiat money, as fiat money debases and most fiat money historically goes to zero. You see, at one point in time, money was backed by the tangible value of gold or other precious metals or legal tender for anything of value. But today, the value of a dollar is what the government says it is, and there are no limits to how much money a government can put into circulation. One of the major issues with fiat money is that fiat money facilitates inflation, which gives people an incentive to spend their money instead of saving it. You see, every time government expands the money supply, the value of money decreases in proportion to the increase in supply, causing inflation. Inflation punishes savers because savings lose value over time. Expanding the money supply is essentially forced redistribution of wealth. On the other hand, no single country or government has enough power to control the Bitcoin network. The system is designed so that every transaction has to be verified and approved by the majority of the network. This ensures that Bitcoin will operate the same way it was designed to operate, regardless of government intervention. But is Bitcoin really a good savings tool? First, let's talk about fiat. So, despite the recent economic downturn in the last decade, if you held on to money, you would have been punished as the money supply continued to inflate and your dollars became less and less valuable. Over the last decade, if you purchased real estate, Bitcoin, or large cap technology stocks like Google or Apple or Tesla that grew faster than the rate of inflation, then you would have been rewarded as you kept up with and often beat inflation. If you didn't, you would be losing wealth. So if you wanted to preserve your wealth, you needed to purchase hard assets like gold, physical property, and Bitcoin and not hold on to fiat money. However, as I mentioned earlier in the video, the problems with gold and the major problems with physical property are taxes and maintenance. I do understand that one of the biggest criticisms of Bitcoin in the past is the volatile nature of Bitcoin. Price fluctuations are dramatic. Bitcoin is fluctuating dramatically in response to the demand of Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin market is still relatively small. So many Bitcoin holders tend to buy or sell large quantities of Bitcoin depending on whether they think the price will go up or go down. And right now, there are just much larger fluctuations in Bitcoin compared to other currencies and commodities. Think about any good or service or commodity. When the demand for a commodity rises, prices are driven up, and higher prices motivate producers to increase production. With an increased supply to balance the increased demand, price begins to stabilize. If the demand for the commodity drops, then prices also drop, and then suppliers will produce less. Think about a grocery checkout line as an example when you're waiting in line. The minute a new grocery checkout line opens, everyone rushes to the new line so they can check out faster. But eventually, we always revert back to equilibrium, where there's an equal amount of people waiting at each grocery checkout line. Demand and supply always revert back to equilibrium. But with Bitcoin, the supply is always fixed, so you cannot increase the overall supply. But as global crypto adoption continues, and if central banks start stockpiling Bitcoin to back their currency, you're going to get a much more stabilized Bitcoin and increasing price over time, as the supply of Bitcoin is always fixed. So to summarize, Bitcoin in my eyes is a form of perfect hard money. It is infinitely scalable, its supply is fixed, you can use it to transmit value over large physical distances, and you can use it to transmit value over time, like thousands of years. So that is why, despite the market volatility in the last couple of years, I have been continuing to accumulate Bitcoin. I have been using the exchange, Crypto.com, to accumulate my Bitcoin on a centralized exchange, and then I transfer it to a hardware wallet like my Keystone Pro. I do have links in the description below to access both of these if you are interested. I truly believe that Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are one of the biggest revolutions that we will see in our lifetime, and it is important to own some Bitcoin in 2023 and beyond, even if it is just a small fraction of your wealth. Crypto education is really important, so please take the time to educate yourself. At the same time, please do your own due diligence on anything and everything. There's a lot of bad and misleading information out there. What questions do you guys have about Bitcoin that I can help answer below? If you enjoyed this video, please do me a favor, please like and subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed this quick little video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.
Yeah.